just like Christ has risen and we're better off for it, the prices of petrol is about to rise, and we're not quite sure that we'll be better off for it. And that is the conversation we'll be having today. The federal government has officially announced that the fuel subsidy will be removed after June 2023. And experts believe that the prices of petrol might rise from the current 185 naira to up to 600 naira. So, is this best for the nation at this point in time? What are the pros of removing subsidy and what are the cons? The Minister of Finance has said that the federal government has also secured $800 million to give to 50 million most impoverished Nigerians. What are the modalities in place to actually share that palliative? To have this conversation, I have with me in the studio an energy policy analyst, Adiola Yusuf. Welcome to the program.
My pleasure. Yeah.
And also a legal practitioner, Mobolaji Oriola. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So we're talking about subsidy removal. First of all, let's just dive straight into it. Let's look at how much we've spent. Let's look at the figures, right? So, from 2005 to 2021, the federal government has spent about 13.69 trillion. That's a huge amount of money that could be used for capital projects. In 2022 alone, the NNPC spent about $10 billion just in the year 2022, right? So we understand why the government needs to save money from removing the subsidy. However, there are certain modalities that are still not in place, like we do not have any refinery running. So can you tell us about the timing of this and how it will affect the common masses, Mobolaji?
Okay, so I think it's very important that we understand what subsidy is in the first place, because I think a lot of Nigerians are not yet sensitized on what subsidy is. If you sample opinions, people just think the government just wants to increase the pump price of petrol. But basically and there's another argument about we have crude oil in Nigeria. Why do we have fuel scarcity and issues around that? So first, let's understand that the crude oil that we have in Nigeria, we don't have the capacity to break it down into PMS, AGO, and the rest. And so we sell it wholesale like that, and we export it. Now, the petrol that you and I use in our cars and our generators and things like that are imported into the country. So the crude oil we have in Nigeria is not broken down into the petrol that I use and you use. The government sells it and then earns foreign exchange from that. And then the government now, and also with the NNPC, now imports petrol into the country. Now, the landing costs of that petrol in Nigeria, landing cost basically is the world oil prices, the price plus cost of moving a freight and so on, is roughly about 300, about 400 naira. And so the government is like, look, this is a bit expensive for the average Nigerian to afford. So let us pick a price that we think is reasonable for the average Nigerian to afford. And then that difference, we will now pay that difference. So the average Nigerian pays 185 naira per liter, and then the landing cost is about 300, 400. So that's about 200 and something plus, is what the government now pays. That is what is called subsidy. So let's establish that first.
Right.
Now, okay. So now the next issue is the government has now said, oh, that subsidy that I have been putting in place for some time, I want to now remove it. Why? The government is saying, firstly, I can no longer afford to pay that difference because I'm not earning enough. My resources, my revenue is dipping. Why is my revenue dipping? Because my major source of income is exporting crude oil. And the crude oil that I'm exporting, firstly, in terms of climate change, people are no longer demanding for it anymore. There's a shift from fossil energy to clean energy, 1, 2, and also prices of crude oil fluctuates from time to time. And then thirdly is sometimes you have a situation whereby there's pipeline vandalism and things like that. So that's basically the reason why the government is saying we want to remove subsidy. Now, in terms of whether this subsidy is here, in terms of how it affects the public, I think we'll wait for subsequent questions on that.
All right, thank you very much. Mobolaji, now you're a legal practitioner, and time in, time out, we've seen a lot of governments say that, in fact, Buhari himself said that subsidy is a fraud, right? And 8 years down the line, he still subsidized fuel. So why is it that he lacks the political willpower to do it when he was supposed to do it? What exactly is happening?
Okay,
Adiola.
Adiola. Thank you. It is very, very important that before delving into that, build on the foundation laid by Mobolaji,
right,
and to do some kind of maybe clarification. One thing that is certain about Nigeria that everyone knows is that Nigeria is an oil-producing country. As at this moment that we are talking, it's still the biggest exporter of the products, producing on daily basis about 1.8 million barrels. So, because Nigeria has 4 refineries with cumulative capacity of 445,000 barrels, there is an arrangement in which every day 445,000 barrels, is allocated for that local refining. So, if those refineries are working, there will be less, pressure on Nigeria bordering about the international price of crude oil. Okay, so having said that, Nigeria couldn't, as we speak as well, none of the 4 refineries, is working. And these 445,000 barrels out of 1.8 million barrels, because at some point Nigeria was doing 2.2 million barrels. This 445,000 barrels is the one that is in charge of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. And this product, because Nigeria has that inability to refine it locally, there is an arrangement that NNPC entered into. They call it direct sales, direct purchase. But for a layman, journalists have been calling it, crude swap. So this 445,000 barrels is the one that they will just go into an arrangement with middlemen or refineries abroad. They take this out of the country, and those ones will supply, the amount of petroleum product that is, at equal to that to Nigeria. So because of the fact that every day Nigerian population is growing and the Nigerian demand for that product is growing, so there is a shortfall, just like I explained.
Right. And
this has been what Nigerians are preparing to something else. But let me talk of the subsidy removal now quickly. There are 4 perspectives to this, and it depends on who belongs to where. That to determine how we look at it. The first one is the social perspective. A lot of Nigerians, or a lot of people that have that perspective, believe that because Nigeria is an oil-producing country, everything that has to do with oil has to be free of charge. There are some people that believe that it has to be a social service. We have to just drive into a filling station and get this product. Those ones are those that belong to that, aspect. The second one are those that are looking at it from the prism of legal. Those want to tell you that based on the passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill and the signing of that into an act by President Buhari, it has become illegal for Nigeria to keep spending money on fuel subsidy because, it is in that legal document and Nigerians shouldn't be wasting money. The third one are those that are looking at it from the economic perspective. Okay, a typical economic person will tell you that government has no business in business because from the analysis you have painted from 2015 to 2022, we are spending 13 trillion naira. You can't keep spending money. At the end of the day, if you look at it very, very well, not all Nigerians have cars. Not all Nigerians are using that product. You are just fueling, you are just subsidizing those that are, above others. Those that can, afford 2 cars, 3 cars, gen and all that. So those are the perspective people are looking at it. And it will depend on the way we are looking. But if I want to look at it generally, you will see that Nigeria has no money. This $800 million you are talking about, Nigerians want to go and get this money. Not that we have it in our pocket. You could see that Nigeria has been running budget deficits over and over again.
Right, right. And yes, it's good to throw out the figures. It's good to identify what the problem is. But I need us to really call a spade, right? We've all given the history of subsidy. We've all given the history of the evolution of this whole process. You've even talked about the Petroleum Act, right? But the big question remains. We've had a government in power for 8 years. How come that one refinery is not working?
Okay.
So can we talk about the corruption in the system that has prevented these refineries from working? And how can we sort of identify those elements, those key elements, so that the next government, we have a president-elect, so that the next government will know that Nigerians are aware of all of this sham going on?
Thank you very much for that question. Few years ago, I was in Houston, Texas, for the Otis Offshore Technology Conference. And I was privileged to sit on the same table with one of the OEM, original asset manufacturers of the Port Harcourt refinery. And what those guys told me was that Nigerian approached them to come and, look at what they could do about Port Harcourt refineries. But the answer they gave was that they cannot do anything about it. Nigerian, they can't soil their names. And the reason for that is that, after completing those refineries, there are guidelines given to Nigeria, particularly when it has to do with turnaround maintenance. It's like a car. You have bought your car, you know that every six months, you need to be changing the engine, you need to be doing maintenance of that. So over the years during the military regime, Nigerians, despite the fact that we have been allocating huge amount of money, budgetary huge amount of money for that, turnaround maintenance, those assets were left unattended to. That is the corruption you are talking about. So now it becomes
to add to what
problem.
you just said, sorry, I'm interrupting you. Now, the facts are, in 2021, they approved 600 billion naira to repair the Port Harcourt refinery. 600 billion.
Okay, so the repair, there is a difference between repair and maintenance. Okay, so when it got to the level that those assets, even those that manufactured those assets could not come again, Nigerian couldn't get those guys to come and, maintain those assets because of the fact that they have left those assets unattended to for a long time, So what they have resorted to is to now say that they want to repair. In fact, there are a lot of contracts in Nigeria that I'm aware that the Nigerian government has entered into. There is a co-location in which, the government has asked the international oil companies to come and, establish refineries inside the location of those refineries so that they will be able to be sharing the pipelines and other assets. So over the years, Nigeria has left this asset unattended to, and that is what has taken us to where we are today.
Okay, Adeola.
Mobolaji, help you with this.
Yeah, sure. I'm coming to that because we barely have, I think, about 6 minutes to the end of this segment, right? We've seen what is happening, and right now they've secured $800 million from the World Bank to share to 50 million vulnerable Nigerians. That's 10 million households, right? That is on the assumption that each household has 5 people, right? Yeah. One of the major issues we have in this country is the trust. There's a mistrust between the people and the people that are governing the people. There's a mistrust between the politicians and the citizens. And we've seen this even with the past palliatives that have happened, be it COVID or other incentives that, our federal government had claimed that, we've shared so and so amount of money to people. We don't know the modalities as which those people are selected. We don't know how they get their database. In fact, we have over 113 million poor Nigerians. We're the poorest nation. We're the nation with the highest number of poor people, right? So how did we even determine how many people are poor? And we just arrived at 50 million. So how can we ensure that this money trickles down to the most vulnerable in the society?
Okay, thank you. But I'm so sorry. I just want to quickly add on that refinery issue before I go into a question. There's there was a committee set up by the former Minister of Petroleum under the Goodluck Jonathan administration, Dizeni Alice-Madueke, and then the committee came out with a report that, look, the cost of refurbishing and putting these old refineries in place is as good as building brand new refineries, and so it did not make sense to set up new refineries, to repair the old refineries. That is one. 2, you must understand that certain people within and outside Nigeria are benefiting from the fact that we do not have refineries in this country. So imagine you own a refinery outside Nigeria, and your refinery is the major supplier of the petrol that I consume in the country. You're not going to let things happen the way they should happen. So people say the government lacks the political will. It is because sometimes those who are for the government are less than those who are against the government. That's on that issue. Now, on the $800 million issue, I think, firstly, I don't know why there's a gap between the government policy and what people understand about the government policy. And I think that has to do with the orientation agency and other information parastatals under the federal government. I think they need to learn from private companies. If a private company wants to market goods and products and services, there's a way to ensure that every single Nigerian knows about their products. We all know about so many brands, but the government doesn't pay that much attention to informing Nigerians about it. Now, if you say you want to give $800 million, dollars to 50 million Nigerians, we need to have verifiable data. Who are these people? And then, I think even before we even go into that, we have to look at, okay, we've done something like this before with the social investment programs. How many people were lifted out of poverty because of that cash transfer that we were doing?
Yeah.
And then compare it, you know, and then bring it forward and look at today, okay, if the policy before did not really bring so many people out of poverty, why am I doing it again? What are the different things? What are the things I can do differently? One. Two, how can I sensitize Nigerians if truly this policy is going to really benefit Nigerians about the people who are benefiting from this? If you go to and meet international donors for grants,
right,
you know, as an NGO, you must show them verifiable data that these are the people who want to give you. And after you finish giving it to them, you must then give them reports. And that's what I think the government should do to its people.
All right. We have a president-elect, and we'll most definitely have a new government very soon, because this current government is leaving. What do you think the president-elect, who is of the opinion that subsidy has to be removed? In fact, it was one of his campaign points that, yes, subsidy has to be removed. How do you think the new government can handle this issue?
Okay. Two things. Number one, through collaboration. Number two, through consultation. Let me talk of consultation first. Anytime I hear the government officials talk about a private refinery that's going to be commissioned very soon, that is the Dangote refinery, if I'm allowed to use that word, I feel so saddened because one of the meetings that I'm privileged to be, where Aliko Dangote was, and I asked him the question of, his motive for establishing that refinery. Remember that on the eve of former President Olusegun Obasanjo regime, he sold that refinery. And Aliko Dangote's company was the one that bought the Port Harcourt refinery. So when former President Yar'Adua came, Nigerians, they went to meet him and told him that it's not a rocket science. So eventually, to cut a long story short, he revoked that license from Dangote. And that was why Dangote said, he told us that was the reason he sat down. He felt so bad. And he felt that, okay, I can start a refinery from the scratch.
Right.
Now, is it not so unfortunate that government officials are now the one talking about Nigeria being out of these shackles because of the Dangote refinery? So consultation that I talk about and collaboration is that there is a problem. There is a problem ahead of this government. The president-elect has said that no going back on that. The labor union, NLC, has told the president that they should prepare for war. So that is why collaboration is very, and consultation is very important. Government, there's no way the government can do that all alone. There are people, just like he said, that are making money from this present situation. You need to talk with them on the same table so that at the end of the day, it's going to be a win-win situation.
All right. Thank you very much, Mobolaji, and of course, Adiola. Thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you.